Good afternoon, good evening, wherever time zone you happen to be watching from. I'm Jeff Timmer. You are on Lincoln Square Strategy Session. Joining me today is Joe Trippi with Lincoln Square and Lincoln Project, and Senior Advisor to Lincoln Project, Trygve Olson. Uh, Welcome, guys. A lot going on as always. Seems like there's never a dull week, never a dull day, never a dull minute, it seems. But y- why don't we start with a little more esoteric discussion rather than news of the day? Uh, Trygve, you've been posting on Substack, something that we at the Lincoln Project have uh, heard you talk about for a long time. Your 7 rules for fighting autocrats. And you've been posting this series on your Substack. Lincoln Square has been reposting those on their Substack, and it's very timely. And I think you can uh, give light to our audience here, some things they can do on a daily basis to push back and do their part to help combat the rise of autocracy, lawlessness in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, so the 7 rules, as you know, Jeff, and you've been hearing me yap about it for the last 5 years, I guess, and Joe. 7 rules came out of my work around the world, and it's one of the things Joe and I have shared. Joe and I were on opposite sides in the U.S., and yet overseas, we ended up working on stuff we didn't even know that we were working on, trying to take down autocrats. We were on the same team. So, but the 7 rules are what they are, which, the biggest rule is you got to play the game that you're in, not the one that you wish you were playing. And we have to have a realization. And one of the things I wrote about is how do you spot an autocrat in a country that's moving towards autocracy. And it's really, at the end of the day, about fear. And Joe knows this, having been in places where you have autocrats in charge. Um, the fear that people have to speak out, to gather, that it's constantly living in fear. And one of the things that I've really tried to get at in what I've been writing is not just, clearly that fear is rising in the US, but what I've been trying to do is also, the Substack is called Searching for Hope, which is an ode to my daughter who was stillborn, whose name was Vilta, which means hope for the future in Lithuanian. Um, but what I've really been trying to do is make points every day of things that people can do. And some of them are directly related to democracy, and some of them, and it really made me smile because I got done with my hockey game the other day, and there was a message from Timmer, good luck in your game. On Sunday, I wrote about going to play hockey, which is the thing I love, to get away from it for a bit. And for some, the other thing is like spending time with my kids or whatever. One of the things that we have to do is we have to do things where we don't think about the fear and take that break. But then also at the same time, we have to have a realization that we've got to get up every day and find 1 or 2 things that we can do, small things, to be relentless, because we're not going to get out of this with one big moment. We're going to get out of this with millions and millions of people taking small actions.
Well,
You know, Tim,
yeah, go ahead, Joe.
one of the things that we've talked about and I talk about on the podcast is that one of the small things people can do is just find one more person, one more family member, one coworker, and engage them in a conversation about joining the fight, about the need to be relentless, to take small steps, to build that place where millions of us are doing everything we can to fight the autocratic movement it's not just here in the United States, it's happening everywhere. But we can, in your local community, by connecting with a friend, a coworker, and getting them to engage, getting them to watch, take part in Lincoln Square or listen to a podcast or to go to one of the protest rallies and take little ways, start to build the movement that takes us on.
Yeah. And Trygve, I don't know if I'll remember exactly the way to phrase this, but one of the lessons that you've pushed and beaten into me is disrupt the vertical power structure of the autocratic rulers. And right now, let's look at some news today that provides a moment, an opportunity for that power structure to be impacted, and that being Elon Musk's Twitter assault on Donald Trump, on the House Republicans, on the big, beautiful bill. He last week announces he's leaving Washington, leaving the administration. His work here is done. He turns around, and by Tuesday, he's like a Scud missile directed at the mantle of Trump's second administration here. That would seem to provide an opportunity to sow some discontent and discord among that vertical power structure with Trump on the right, with the Republican Party.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. One of the things that's so kind of counterintuitive about the game that we're in, right? You know, in the politics that we know, at least for the last, I don't know how many years, probably as long as I've been doing it, or just about, and probably longer. Um, it really has been a red-blue divide. Um, but the reality is, in the game that we're in, there's a lot of alliances of convenience, and there's people who are allies because they're standing for democracy, or there's even allies of convenience. One of the rules that I have is the Stalin rule. It's rule number 4, and the reason I gave it the Stalin rule is it started when I was working in that part of the world. But Churchill and Roosevelt understood that Joseph Stalin was probably the second worst human being to ever walk the planet. Literally the second worst human being. But they had to stop the worst human being to ever walk the planet. And so we kept them afloat, right? And we allied with Stalin so he could fight later. And that's what's kind of weird about it. Like Elon Musk, I'm no fan of Elon Musk. I'm not in any way, shape, or form. But today, when he's attacking Donald Trump, he is our ally. Because if he is causing even one person who is committed to Trump to question Donald Trump, then he's our ally in this moment. And that might be creating an opening with that person. And so we have to really be far more strategic in some ways in this battle than we normally would be.
Well, Joe, let's look at this moment. The bill barely made it out of the House. It took all the political capital and arm twisting that Trump was able to muster to get the House members in line with him, even though they're almost always in line with him. And now some of those, what they call the Freedom Caucus members, are saying, wait a minute, this isn't what I thought I voted for. And the bill is now in the Senate, the Republican controlled Senate, where it was already facing some uncertainty what it's going to go through. What are some strategies here in your estimation that this moment calls for, that people that we as individuals can impact, can make a difference in this moment to disrupt what would be the biggest spending, biggest deficit, biggest debt bill, biggest expansion of government in U.S. history?
Look, I think it's a time to get loud. I mean, to call your representative, and call these people, and let them know that you're not you oppose all the cuts, or what they're doing to veterans, or what they're doing to seniors, or children, or the SNAP program. But it's to put the maximum amount of pressure on every single one of them, so that they, in a lot of ways, so many of them fear the MAGA base for their primaries. What we need to do is to make them fear us in the general, and to make sure they understand that it's a simple thing. It's a phone call. It's going to the local office of your representative, which is a little bit bigger lift than the phone call. But the more they hear that, and the more these divisions that are occurring within the factions, with Musk in there too, the better chance we have of disrupting their ability to pass this thing. And of course, that makes Trump weaker as he struggles to pull this together. I mean, I just think it's not it's not a passive time. And it's also to support every single voice out there, from Liz Cheney all the way over to Bernie Sanders. It's a broad coalition, and to support any one of them that you can get behind to amplify their voice in this moment.
Trygve, yeah, your mention of the Stalin rule is a good one right here, because at least for this afternoon, Elon Musk is a potential ally, asymmetrical ally, that might not last until tomorrow. But for now, this is where people need to look and say, yes, he's distasteful. Yes, it was maybe the biggest cyber attack ever, and didn't save any money, ends up costing the U.S. money. But as given the fact that Trump might be weakened by this, what does your experience, what are your rules for dealing with autocrats tell us about what a cornered autocrat like Trump does in a moment like this? What do we need to watch out for at a moment where he feels weak, he feels desperate? What are the kinds of things that could come from this?
I mean, a couple of things that you have to understand. All these guys, whether it's Lukashenko or Putin or Trump or whatever, everybody that I've ever encountered who has autocratic personality disorder, and I bet Joe has seen this exact same thing. Like, we've seen a lot of these guys in various places around the world. The first thing you have to understand about them is they are the ones who are really afraid. Like, autocrats live in fear. Milosevic, like all of them. Mugabe, just the list that Joe and I worked against goes on and on. But they're all, so Donald Trump is afraid. Now, does that make him more dangerous or less? You know what? Like it's a little bit like Putin today. The Ukrainians just socked him in the nose in a way that no military has probably socked anybody since the Japanese whacked us, right? And we had the capacity, because we were a democracy, where Franklin Roosevelt was able to rally the country. And we had boys in places like Iwo Jima, or quite frankly, I just learned recently that a guy from my hometown, who was a mailman, for God's sakes, and a farmer in my town, was one of the boys of Point du Hoc. He was literally one of the 100 guys who survived and held that on D-Day. Those guys weren't asking, did you vote for Wendell Willkie or Franklin Roosevelt, when they were running off the boats, right? And so what you have to understand is Donald Trump is afraid of that. And I think, with Elon, right, today, and this is how you think about how you tear down the vertical. If you have a crazy uncle or somebody in your life who has been all about Elon and MAGA, and it's been talking up Elon and what Doge is doing, honestly, it's about them. It's not about you. So reach out to them and just be like, what's going on with Elon and Trump? And ask it out of genuine curiosity. Because the key is and this is what Donald Trump is afraid of at the end of the day. He's afraid of the cognitive dissonance that the truth's being exposed. And today, Elon Musk is speaking some truth. You may not agree with the perspective that he's coming at it, but he is speaking some truths about what's transpiring.
But
So use that.
Yeah. But the other thing is, think about the dissonance that's occurring even with these members and the senators, right?
Yeah.
They were fearing, they were told, you either vote my way or Elon's going to spend $20 million in a primary against you.
Right.
And now Elon said, this is crap. So like, you're now one of these, and that's what I'm saying. So like, at the same time, if each of us is just putting a little pressure on too, talking, as you said, to some of those, MAGA folks, and asking them curiosity, with a sort of the curious matter of, what's going on with these two, just at every step, small things, but those millions of conversations that we can start to have, or the phone calls, can make a big difference in this moment because of the dissonance that's going on right now within that. But it turns out I think, Trygve too, the other thing we know is that autocrats, not only the fear, but they understand a little bit better than we do how fragile their coalition that they're holding together
Yeah,
really is.
100%.
Yeah, and so right now is a very, very precarious moment, and I think Trump probably gets that. And as you said, the fear is up there. We need to put as much pressure on all these different pressure points as we can right now.
And I mean, think about a guy like Mugabe, right, Joe? I mean, that's not Joe and I were working on Mugabe against Mugabe on the same side and didn't even know it. And I wondered who the guy was that was arranging all the pictures of election results being sent to where I was sitting. But turns out it was Trippi. But I don't know. I don't know if you were there when that conversation happened, Timmer, but it was pretty funny because we were out for dinner and a bunch of us, Trippi and I, got talking about Mugabe. Anyway, here's the thing: Donald Trump lives in fear of the people within his own coalition. I mean, Joe is totally right, and that's what you saw with like Mugabe, Putin. What's Putin really afraid of? Yeah, he's afraid of the Ukrainians and the democracy that they were building. Hence, he's basically saying to him, "I will kill you if you pursue this." But at the same time, what's he afraid of? He's afraid of somebody in his own world coming in and taking him out. What's Donald Trump afraid of? He's probably afraid of JD Vance and Mike Johnson and all the rest of these guys eventually getting fed up. And now you got Elon out there. What if Elon decides to turn his money against Trump, which is why it never ends well for people like Elon who make that deal. And honestly, if Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg or any of those people are listening, don't take the bait and get in bed with them because it never ends well. You can't go to bed with Jenna Jameson or Stormy Daniels and think you're going to wake up with Snow White.
Well, Elon is signaling that. He's saying, I'm ready to start spending against everybody who voted for this and who
That's what I'm saying.
So
you were told 2 weeks ago, if you don't vote for the way Trump wants you to, I'm going to primary you with $20 million. And now you're being told, if you do vote for this, I'm coming after you. It's got to be really shaky inside the House and Senate caucuses.
Yeah. 100%.
One of the things that we see from watching people rise up and topple or destabilize autocratic regimes around the world is gathering in the streets, showing force, showing solidarity. And we've seen some of that here in the United States more after Trump's election back in 2016 and when he had assumed office first in 2017. But we've seen a little bit of it this year. There are some protests like that planned for June and talk of more through the summer. Yes, that's an effective tactic in mass and numbers. Is that something that Trump and the MAGA forces, the Steve Bannons and the Stephen Millers, is that what they're looking for? Is getting Americans into the street where then things can be manipulated to somebody breaks a window and they call it a riot and they declare martial law in the city of Portland. That kind of the same dynamics that we saw some of the proposed responses that they never followed through on during the summer of 2020 during the George Floyd protests that were going on all around the country. Is there a likelihood that the Trump world is looking for those as opportunities as an inflection point to crack down more?
Yeah. What I would say, having worked in all these places when I would be working with the opposition, you're not going to control what Donald Trump does, and you can't let them dictate the terms. So, they're going to do if that's the route they're going, they're going to find the pretenses to do that. And so it's a little bit like, I don't think I've seen a lot from Donald Trump and that would suggest to any of us that he's going to be all that gung ho on handing Congress back over to the Democrats peacefully after the 2026 elections, right? But we can't let that dictate what we do. We've got to do what we do, and you
But,
know.
but
So I
also,
just think,
also we started this whole thing out with Trygve clearly, and I think correctly, saying that all these guys, they live on fear. And so there's the fear, right? The fear of, oh my gosh, if we go out in the streets, they'll use that as an excuse to start to start the crackdown. It's that fear is to actually stop us from going into the streets. And so no, it's 3 million people now. We've talked about this. There will be a point that's not a threatening enough number. So no, everything's cool. The most important thing is to make sure they're peaceful and nonviolent protest marches or protests of what's going on, and to multiply. If each of us found one more person, one more friend, and wherever you go, take one more with you, we're at 6 million. And look, I think, somewhere up there at 12, 13, 14 million people, that's when we'll get to the answer to your question, Timur. But I actually believe that kind of declaration of martial law or whatever the hell, or excuse to crack down may actually be part of what actually spirals into several more million than the 12, 13, 14 million that triggers it. Because
yeah, I mean, I think if he goes that route, that because you have a lot of people on the street. I mean, it's what, when I would go to all these places when I was working for McCain and IRI, I kind of had my little shtick, and I would get sent to the running joke was, if it's really bad, I would get sent. But one of the things that I said in the Middle East to some people one time, there was a kid sitting there with his girlfriend, and you could tell that this guy was afraid to be there. And his girlfriend, the only reason he was there because his girlfriend had dragged him there. He's like, maybe a college kid. But he kept asking me, he's like, well, we don't have democracy in our country. You don't understand how that is. And I'm like, why is that? And he's like, well, because, the regime does this, 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 and this. And I said, nope, that isn't the reason. And we kept going round and round. And finally, his girlfriend said, because we don't have enough of us. And I said, is it because you don't have enough of you, people who feel like you, or is it because you don't have enough of them who are being active and
right.
engaging? And we are the majority. I know that. And I will tell you, you guys know this more than anybody. Like, I've never been the guy who wants to be out front, and hence the whole getting on Substack. If it wasn't for the fact that Substack basically makes you do that, to be on it, to do their Substack lives, I would have never gotten on it. But I will tell you, I can't believe the people back home who signed up and are following it. You can it gives you that star thing where you can see who's reading it. It's people, I'm telling you, we're the majority. They don't know. And the most heartening thing about this has been, if I can give them a little voice that they're not alone, that's an awesome thing. I mean, it's people I knew from Republican politics, people who knew my mom, friends of theirs who've been loyal Republicans forever, who are following me. I would have never imagined.
No, there was a survey on this stuff that showed that a majority, well over 50% of Americans would be willing to protest peacefully what the Trump administration is doing. And the next question they asked was, well, and then they asked, have you done it? Have you not done it? And there's obviously a lot of that 50 whatever percent had not participated in a protest, and asked them why. And it was because they didn't know where to go.
Yeah.
No one had asked them. No one had called on them they had not heard a request, a call to take action. And so that makes you that person to say, because there are many more of us who will and would, but they need a friend, a coworker, a family member to say, hey, I'm going, come with me. And by the way, bring your mom, whatever. But people will do it. They just need to hear that and to be part of the community. No, they're not going to be alone out there when they go. And I think that's a key thing for people to understand. And I think it is things like Trygve, what you're doing, and what Lincoln Square is doing, to give people that feeling that they belong to a community, that we can take, that we can't lose faith in our own power to change this, because we have that power. We just have to start using it in a more active, engaged way.
And yeah, let's remember what happened the last time there were mass protests in the street and Donald Trump was president. He went and hid in the bunker.
Yeah.
That's what he's going to do. It wasn't until after everything had dissipated that he acted like a tough guy walking across Lafayette Square and holding the Bible upside down. And so that's the true measure of Donald Trump: weak, afraid, cowardly, and let's not forget that. Let's keep that hope, and keep active over the summer. We can't take a summer break from this fight. As tiring as it is, as exhausting as the torrent of obstacles, new rabbits released by Trump and the administration, things for us to chase, a lot of which are just distraction. There are things we need to keep doing, and can do to make it effective. And I think you've laid that out here very, very well today. Any parting thoughts before our time here is done, Joe Trippi?
No, just don't take the summer off. It's no time to play dead. It's time to take the small steps each of us as individuals can do. And we'll be out there every, on Tuesdays, and Trygve with his Substack, explaining how and what you can do to make this movement to save our democracy successful, but more and grow. But also to bring you, it's not just here in the United States. This is a movement for democracy that has to include a lot of people around the world who are facing similar attacks to their liberty and freedom as we are.
Trygve, parting thoughts for the audience?
I would say two things, and they're kind of related. So when I was doing the international stuff with McCain and those guys, I got asked at one point to go to the White House, and some people wanted to talk to me, which was a little overwhelming about like what it was I was doing. And I went to that meeting. It was during the Bush years, and somebody said, "You're like the Karl Rove of colored revolutions." And I said, "I'm not the Karl Rove of colored revolutions. I'm the Anthony Robbins of I'm the Tony Robbins of colored revolutions." And they're like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "You think my job is to be a political strategist? I'm like 10% Karl Rove, 90% Tony Robbins. I just get people to believe in themselves." And that really is a big part of these fights. We have to get people not to be afraid, to believe in themselves. We are the majority. And the second piece from that, this summer, we need to figure out, and this comes from the first Orange Revolution in Ukraine. I remember meeting with a guy who'd been doing focus groups, and he's like, "What we need is a color." And I'm like, "A color?" Or something that people can know that the person sitting across the cafe thinks like they do and believes what they believe. And because they are the majority, we are the majority, but like we don't, we don't know it. So one of the things we need to spend the summer doing is making sure that people understand, who feel like you do, and don't assume that they don't, just because maybe they didn't before. Elon Musk a week and a half ago was Donald Trump's biggest fanboy. He ain't today, right? So don't assume that. Remember, it's about them who and let them know they're not alone. Let them know that they're going to be welcomed with open arms.
Yeah. Well, Thank you. That's been my refrain for the last now 10 years since Donald Trump came down the Jethro Bodine golden escalator back in 2015. There are more of us than there are of them. They want you to think differently. Don't fall for it. Know that you're not alone. We are the majority in this country. There are things we can do every day to make a difference. Uh, let's go forth and in save the country, save the world, save democracy. You can tune in next week at 5 p.m. to watch the strategy session. The lineup of Joe Trippi and Rick Wilson and Stuart Stevens should return next week. You can, in the meantime, stay tuned to Lincoln Square channels to watch lives. Make sure you're reading the commentary and tuning in for podcasts like That Trippi Show. Thank you for joining. I'm Jeff Timmer. Have a great night.
Thanks.